Good evening, everybody. We want to welcome you to this first viewing of Perspectives. It is a homegrown program of the Ministerial Department of the North Caribbean Conference, where we seek to affirm best practice in pastoral ministry. We also take the opportunity to celebrate the laymen and women around this North Caribbean Conference who have been making an invaluable contribution to the life of the church, especially during this COVID-19 period. And finally, Perspective is intended to not just celebrate the ministry of each one, but to support and affirm the ministry models that has been existing around this conference since COVID-19. And we are really delighted that we can join you in your homes this evening, and we are so thankful that we can have an illustrious panel of men sitting with us this evening who can share in this conversation so that we can bring enlightenment to those of you who are listening. So let me take some time to introduce the panel for you this evening. Our first panelist is Pastor Hesketh Matthew. Of course, Pastor Hesketh Matthew is the Special Assistant to the North Caribbean Conference President, responsible for evangelism. He also carries the responsibilities of Stewardship and Spirit of Prophecy Director here in the North Caribbean Conference. We are delighted to have him here as one of our panelists in this first viewing. Welcome, Pastor Matthew.
Thank you.
We have with us, of course, the experienced Pastor Earl Daniel. Pastor Daniel is a man of no mean caliber. He has a true pastor's heart, and we are so happy that we can join him. He can join us in this conversation. As a matter of fact, the conversation this evening is actually about what he's offering to ministry during this COVID-19 time. And so we want to take the opportunity to welcome Pastor Earl Daniel, the district pastor for the Christiansted and the Peters Rest Seventh-day Adventist churches here on St. Croix. Welcome, Pastor Daniel.
A joy and a privilege to be here.
And our third panelist is Elder Horace Graham. Elder Graham is the first elder of the Christiansted Seventh-day Adventist Church, a man of no mean caliber. He's an expert in his field. He's one who has made constant contribution to the life of the church. He gives voluntary his time to the service of God. He's an avid reader. He's also an astute communicator. And we are delighted that he can share ministry with Pastor Earl Daniel as they lead the Christiansted congregation. Let me take some time to say welcome to you, Pastor Elder Graham.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
So this evening on Perspective, we are going to examine the ministry that took place at the Christiansted Church for the COVID-19 period. Of course, a few weeks ago, we released the story of how the church was able to minister and to embrace ministry to 100% of its members during the COVID-19 times. It's a celebration. It's worth a celebration. And the story has taken on international acclaim, Pastor Earl Daniel.
So happy about that.
The story is not only a local homegrown story, Elder Graham, but it has taken on international acclaim. Not only is it here in the North Caribbean Conference, but it has gone wide across the Inter-American Division. And 2 weeks ago, last week, it was published in the story of the Adventist Review. That's the worldwide paper of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. When I speak to my colleagues around the Caribbean Union, they are using the story as a model to help pastors know how they can dish out pastoral care. And when you go to the South American Division, many of the presidents are using the story in order to help pastors know how they can get insight into caring for membership during difficult times. I want to ask Pastor Matthew, what's his take on that? How do you celebrate with Pastor Daniel?
It is a tremendous acknowledgement to when one acknowledges the level of intentionality that was actually put into what was delivered at the Christiansted Church. I really concluded when I saw the article that this level of delivery did not come by happenstance.
That's
it
right.
was very intentional.
Yeah, and we want to celebrate with them.
Certainly,
Yeah.
certainly.
So let me ask Pastor Daniel and Elder Graham, I don't know which one first, but what was the impetus for addressing your senior population in particular during the COVID-19 period?
Well, let me say first of all, one of the greatest assets that a pastor has when he comes to a church is to pinpoint people with great talent
Yeah,
and utilize
Yeah.
the talent that you find in the church.
Correct.
And truly, Elder Graham is such a talented person as a first elder. The only thing that I could do was to utilize the talent that was there in the church.
beautiful, beautiful. I want to, before I go to you, Elder Graham, I want to go back to Pastor Matthew because I think he's touched a very sensitive spot here. And that has to do with leadership, empowering giftedness in a congregation.
Certainly right. I always contend that the primary role of a pastor is to enable, empower, and engage.
Yeah,
And Pastor Daniel has done it excellently.
beautiful. Elder Graham.
Well, let me say that one of the things that I truly appreciate about ministry at the Christian State Church has been that we do have a solid set of members who are willing to serve. And I think that that's what really marked the hallmark of this whole development is the fact that people were willing to serve, Pastor. And so once we heard the news about the COVID-19 and we listened carefully to some of the challenges that they identified, the experts in the field identified, they said that seniors, 60 years and above, represented the most vulnerable populations. We quickly did an assessment of our congregation and found out that we had about 95% of our members that were 60 and above. That speaks to us about what we need to do for evangelism, but more so it taught us that we had a population that was considered most at risk. And with a team of individuals, we had business owners, we had people who worked in health, we had folks who were administrators in different areas, whether in the hospitals and healthcare healthcare areas, and they said, listen, we have to do something important. We have to do this and take hold of this challenge and deal with this matter. And so it wasn't myself. I didn't just jump to it and says, let's get this done.
Yeah.
I had people around me that says, listen, this is what we need to do to make it happen. And we worked with them and pulled this off in the way that it was done.
Well, I recall when the conference president, Pastor James, sent a circular out to pastors around the field. One of the things he said was that each church should establish a COVID-19 task force. And that task force was charged with the responsibility of managing the affairs of the church, giving direction and leadership. So before I come to you, Pastor Matthew, I want to ask Pastor Daniel, how did the church designate which members would be on the COVID-19 task force? How did you designate that?
We were very careful to look for people with different skill sets,
Yeah.
people who had the different type of skills that would be needed for the areas of expertise.
Okay.
That's the term I really like. That could deal with the situations that would develop as people dealt with this pandemic that we were faced with. And so we picked individuals who had the expertise. For example, we picked people who had counseling, we had ideas or counseling abilities. We picked people who had the ideas as to how communications or had communication skills. We looked for people with a background, with business, because all of these were the people that we needed to form that core group that could deal with the various
Correct. You want to respond to that,
Yeah,
Graham?
I think that's the essence of what
Yeah.
really transpired. It was very organic in the way that this came together. We really truly looked at the church and its needs first, and then identified individuals that could really jump at it. And like I said, this was an upwell from within the church that said, hey, we have to take appropriate action to safeguard the population that we are dealing with, which is the most vulnerable, 60 and above. And I really appreciate the fact that within the church, there are members who truly commit themselves to ministry. And that's how good leadership sees that, draws that out, and elevates it.
I'm glad you spoke of leadership, because I'm coming over to Pastor Matthew. Leadership must empower people.
That's right.
And when you're dealing with leadership in this crisis, you need to know who your people are and find the expertise. Do you believe the church has all the expertise for it, Pastor Matthew?
It's amazing to see the cluster of persons and giftedness and the diversity, the large spread of human resource that the church has at its disposal. And so when a pastor can hone and give laser focus to just allow people to exercise their giftedness and to display their potential, we just expand the potential of a church. You know, so that is just a remarkable disposition, that a pastor can just allow so much latitude for people to bring all their skill sets into one pool for the dynamism and the growth of the church.
And I've found out when you empower people, you get more out of them.
That's right.
And I think that's one of the good things that Christian said. You brought all these individuals into one so that we can bring out the best of them. But apart from that, there were some critical areas that the church had to focus on. Areas like what you had to focus on when the task was made.
So immediately what we recognize is that this most vulnerable population, there are things that we have to do that would address their specific needs. And so what we looked at was, number one, who? We wanted to know what was some of the areas of response that we needed to provide, and what could we do to be able to address the specific needs of people during this pandemic. And what came out of that was we identified the fact that we had the most vulnerable population. Then we also recognized that we had individuals, Pastor, that that needed specific things. So we knew that one of the signals of the COVID-19 situation was that you would have fevers and other things of that nature. They identified that. So we purchased thermometers. And then we went ahead and we had the experts that are part of our congregation, and they created medicine lists so that folks would know exactly what type of medications they are taking, just in case they got into a situation where they had to go to the hospital or they needed medical attention. They don't have to go scrounging for where to find this information. So we put together a packet that had hand sanitizer, it had information on hand washing, it had critical, listen, this was the most important piece. We wanted to make sure that those who needed it was safe. And we created that space for them. And let me tell you, people felt so empowered and so appreciative of the work, the ministry that emanated from the Christian Said Church during this time.
Okay, Pastor Daniel, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, we not only did that,
I think Pastor Matthew would want to say something on that also.
Yes, as I was saying, we not only did that, but younger individuals were appointed to attend to the senior individuals of the church, so that we had asked them to stay at home.
Yes.
And so whatever their needs
we also asked you to stay at home.
Whatever the needs are. Well, I was so blessed that I had these young individuals coming to my home and saying, Pastor, whatever your needs are, we're there. If it's to pick up your mail, if it's to pick up your medication, we're there to do that for you. And it was just a joy to know that these young people were willing to do that. And not only that, but you received a call ever so often. And everybody was calling one another. That just made it possible to know how our members were taken care of.
Well, I must say, you're listening to Perspectives. This is a program that we're premiering here this evening that is meant to celebrate ministry and to affirm what is taking place in ministry around the North Caribbean Conference. And this evening we are premiering Pastor Earl Daniel and El Horace Graham as they speak to the whole issue of membership care and the extended pastoral ministry that he has given during this COVID-19 period. I'm coming to you, Pastor Matthew, as it relates to the way the church dealt with its membership during this period and how they were able to mobilize these young people to bring ministry to the home of our seniors. What's your take about that?
Yes, Elder, I took note of it, and I think it is very significant, because on one hand, there is the idea of creating a church that is distinct and separate. You have the conversation of age categorizing, and some people even advance the idea of having a youth church separate from a senior church. But we are seeing the beauty when you can have a fine amalgamation, the integrated involvement of both young and old. And as Pastor Daniel spoke, I thought, what a beautiful model to transfer the values of the church.
Yeah.
While they are connecting with the older people of the church. They are learning the system of the church. And we are transferring to them the values and models of how to do ministry.
Correct.
You know, so I thought that was a very beautiful model that can be emulated. Don't separate them. There will be times for focus group ministry, but as much as possible, allow this continued integrated ministry between young and old.
And you know,
yes,
if I may, Pastor.
Go ahead.
Very interesting, and thank you so much, Pastor Matthew, for that observation. But here's something that folks have to realize in this time, that this was a time to allow and to let the youngsters, the younger members of the church, represent the values that they have been taught.
Right.
It's not that it was a transference of values anymore. This was now the values have been transferred, they have been inculcated, and so here it is demonstrated that there's no fear for the church in the future.
Correct.
That those values that have been taught, that have been ingrained in these youngsters, the willingness and desire for service was manifested in the Christian State Church among those young people willing to go out and do this ministry.
Beautiful.
Let me just say to you also is that what we did, and the group, we had it worked out under the health ministries component, and they took time to teach those young people how to don and doff the masks and gloves and how to protect themselves, and why it was important to wear masks and to keep social distance when they make the connection with those folks, how to bring items in and deliver it and walk away, and still how to greet and still show that compassion even if they had to keep appropriate social distance.
Beautiful. I think one of the points that came out when we had our meeting is that even in periods like these, all the ministries of the church can still function.
Definitely.
Yes.
All the ministries of the church. And this model embraces all the ministries of the church coming together for one focused opportunity, and that is to deliver ministry.
Right.
And we celebrate that. But Pastor Daniel, I want to ask this question. What's the feeling of the members, the senior members, as they received the ministry? What was the feeling as they received the ministry during that period?
Well, as you will realize, it is a time when ministry has to be done on a different level.
Yeah.
For example, technology is playing a great role in how ministry is being delivered. And as we have stated, we have an older membership.
Yeah.
And many of them are not savvy enough to handle the ministry through the technology that is provided on Facebook. Some of them are, and you might be surprised to know that some of them are. However, the church found a way to minister to those who did not have the capability of communicating, of using the technology, because we were able to develop an online system whereby Sabbath school classes could meet as though they were meeting together right in their church by just calling in on a number. And that was made so easy.
Yeah.
All they had to do was to call a number, and 5, 6 of them were together, as it were, by just calling that number, and they were discussing. They could hear one another's voice there was camaraderie, there was fellowship.
Yeah.
You know, and that has been done in the church so that the members could feel as though they were not left alone, but they were still receiving the ministry as though nothing has happened.
Beautiful.
Pastor, the members were truly happy. When I say the seniors, everyone that I speak to, everyone that I communicate with, have indicated without fail that where they have received the connectedness with the church through this COVID-19 task force and the initiatives of the younger people connecting with them, and even some of the older members that are still making calls as part of this team, the people have saying how they so appreciated it. When I get by and I have a chance to see individuals, they would say, you know, this person called me or that person called me. And you know what's exciting about that? It's that they are connected and it's intentional. And I think that's what I think drew the best responses. The fact that people were being touched in terms of the emotional component, not the physical part. We did maintain social distancing, but people were being connected.
Yeah, I want to ask you, come back to you, El Graham, because I think your communication department worked hard during the time.
I am
and
so excited.
there was a theme that went through, is that no member must be left behind. How did you respond to that? No member must be left behind.
But one of the key things that we recognized initially was that, yes, there's technology and technology can serve a key purpose, but we had to look at what kind of technology would be best suited for
your
the
church.
demographic.
Beautiful.
And one of the things that we recognized immediately was that we had to strike at the lowest common denominator. What form of communication did everyone have that at any moment we could speak to everyone and leave nobody out?
Right.
And we recognized that telephonic communication, telecommunication was key. We had video conferencing capabilities, and we have Facebook, and we have Zoom, and all the other platforms that's possible, but we opted to use free conference call as a means to connect all the members. And so those who can come on with Wi-Fi and be able to connect with the video conferencing capabilities, they can do so. And believe it or not, they have senior members that are able to do it. And then you have some who are not so savvy and not interested in that. We have them able to come in through the telephone. And the truth is, the connection through voice has been proving to be one of the most important aspects of staying sane during this period.
Okay, beautiful. I'm coming to you, Pastor Matthew. Out of this whole COVID-19, I am sure some ministry models would have evolved, that as evangelism coordinator, and especially evangelism coordinator to the president, I'm sure that there are some ministry models that would have come out of this that you can identify, that I believe you want to take some time to affirm and to elucidate about.
Yes. Well, thank you again, Pastor Philbert, because it is indeed true. When one acknowledges, one, the willingness of the church to adapt to the current state of affairs is one compelling factor that is driving us as a ministerial, as a evangelism department. The willingness, the desire to be flexible, adaptable, and to speak to the pulse.
Yes.
And I think that was clearly demonstrated. As we talk to the period of COVID-19 and our adaptability to speak to the pulse, the other significant factor is to assess what are the available vehicles that will most readily connect with people.
Okay.
Elder Graham just identified what they figured out to be the most available feature, device. And those two things are the platform, as it were, that the evangelism department is advocated. One, church, be adaptable, be flexible, speak to the pulse, know where the majority of people are in terms of your ability to reach them. Now, there will be a plethora of devices and mediums, but one must know one's context, and whether it's WhatsApp, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Facebook, these are all of the different platforms that COVID-19 certainly brings to the surface and allows us as a church to utilize. And I really want to admit that our journey into technology has somewhat blossomed and expanded in this period of COVID-19.
Correct.
And has really opened the eyes of the church to the awesome, unique opportunity we have to reach the masses.
Right.
So apart from the devices and the platform that the evangelism department is saying utilize, whether it's text evangelism, whether it's sending somebody a positive message every day via chat, whether it's Zoom, whether it's an online Bible study, these are all of the resources that we are offering. And subsequently, I believe, Pastor Philbert, we probably would be able to speak more into how some of these models can be utilized.
Correct.
But while we give ear to these different devices and different mediums, there is something that I want to underscore. That is the value of the human touch.
Right.
Ellen G. White makes a statement that is just permanent in terms of its usefulness. She talks about Christ's method alone being unmatched. The Savior mingled with people. He went among them. He won their confidence. And then he told them, come follow me. So this is one of the concerns and the pathways that we have been advancing, is that each platform can be better fed
Yes.
when church members intentionally, during the COVID period, seek to minister in tangible, practical ways to people within their immediate environment. And we have captioned it the neighborly approach.
Yeah, I'm
The
going
neighborly approach.
to come back to that.
Yes.
I'm going to come back to that. I don't know those of you who might have joined us now. You're looking at perspectives. This is an opportunity that we go to celebrate ministry, to affirm the laymen and women who've been involved in ministry, and some marvelous and incredible ministry models have been evolved over the last few weeks. And weekly, we're going to be bringing them to you. But I want to come back, before I come to you, Pastor Matthew, I want to come over to Pastor Daniel, because in line with what you just spoke of, Pastor Matthew, the article states that Pastor Daniel continues ministry as normal. Elder Graham indicated that they tried hard to get him to stay home. But I guess a pastor is a pastor, and the true pastor in him never sleeps. So even during COVID-19 period, Pastor Daniel was carrying on ministry as normal. So you want to speak to this whole issue, Pastor Daniel, of your ministry still continuing as normal during COVID-19 time?
A method that we have developed is something that is ingrained in me as a minister, by the way. Visitation of members is key
Yeah.
to my ministry.
Now that speaks to what Pastor Matthew said
Yes.
earlier on, the personal touch.
Right.
That's right.
We know that we cannot go into the home and sit down in
Yes.
the chair and talk with members. But just to give an example, one Sabbath afternoon, a few of my elders and myself just went out into certain area of our district.
Yeah.
And we just stayed at the gate of
Yeah.
the members.
Yeah.
And when we called them and they came out and they saw the pastor and his elders visiting them at the same time, they were so excited and they were calling everybody else in the district saying, look out for the pastor and his elders, they're coming. And we went from home to home. And what else has been happening? Our praise and worship team,
Yeah.
they are going from home to home. Of course, we are keeping our social distance. We are following what the government has said. But they stand up there at the gate and they sing, and the members are excited. They feel that real ministry is happening to them even though they're not coming to church
Well,
on days.
I must say that I benefited from the ministry that Pastor Daniel offered or is offering during this period, because I got my visit last week, and I know people on this panel that got their visit also.
Oh, sure. I was also privileged.
I must say that it was really refreshing when I got my visit last Sabbath, and I want to thank you for the ministry model that you offered during this period.
I wanted to address just something off of what Pastor Matthew was saying, because it's so critical, especially for churches that may have limited budgets, especially during this time, to consider that yes, the human touch is important, but I consider that also the fact that the touch from the human voice is something that's intangible, that's invaluable. And I want to encourage folks to think about, even in the ministry component. So what we decided to do as part of what we're doing is to say, when you share the message, the gospel, it should not just be a one-sided conversation. And so we believe in the small group model, and that's what we had a plan A, which was to create small groups. But then we decided to walk it back a little bit because of the amount of inputs that would be needed. And so we created some lesser distribution of groups, but smaller groups. And we allowed members to call in on Sunday nights for evangelism. And when they call that line and they hear one another, you hear the exaltation in the voices, the glory, the praise, the jubilation that comes from some of these members to say hello in group, not just one-on-one, but in group. We have the presentation, the speaker speaks and shares, presentations are made, and then right at the end, folks either ask questions or they get a chance to express themselves one to another. It is one of the most glorious expressions that you would ever hear, to know people who are sequestered, who are at home, who follow the government's rules, but were still able to stay connected with one another. Slightly different than just presenting something on Facebook. They were able to talk to one another almost face to face, and it's a beautiful expression.
Well, I must say, Ella Graham, that my wife did call in on one of the meetings. I even tried to call in on one Wednesday evening, and I do value and appreciate what you have done. And ladies and gentlemen, we are reviewing in perspective this evening the story of the ministry model that has been given by the Christian State Church during this COVID-19 period. We are almost coming to an end for what we have been doing, and we want to celebrate what took place at the Christian State Church. It has, as I said, it has received international acclaim. It's a model that was developed by them using all of the various mindset and skill set that came together, and we are delighted that we can share it with the world, and we want to say thanks to them. Our panelist this evening was Pastor Hesketh Matthew, the Special Assistant to the President for Evangelism, Pastor Earl Daniel, who is the pastor for the church, and his first elder, who is Elder Horace Graham. We're going to conclude this evening by asking Pastor Matthew if he has any final words for our viewers this evening regarding this whole the church and its operation. We're going to ask Pastor Daniel to take some time to celebrate his leaders and to affirm what they've done, and we're going to give Elder Graham an opportunity to celebrate his pastor for what he has done, because what we're doing here this evening is not just to celebrate the offerings, not just to identify the ministry, but to affirm the ministry that has been given. And though we might not be able to give monetary rewards, we can say how incredible the journey has been and how God has blessed. So Pastor Matthew, we're going to start with you.
Thank you, certainly. In summary, I'd like to say that in this period of COVID-19, the church retains the mission of Jesus, which is to make disciples of all men. It involves two things. One, to provide consistent nurture, as was demonstrated in all the things that were done so creatively by Christian State, and also an intentional focus on those who are not yet members of the church. This is a time when we can use real voice, hands and feet in tangible, practical things to enlarge in the kingdom of God. And this is the drive and the wish of the evangelism department for every member of God's church, to enlarge their circle of acquaintance in this period of Corona.
Pastor Daniel?
As I listened to Pastor Matthew, how he articulated the importance of small groups for evangelism, the messenger of the Lord has clearly indicated that we already have in our church a small group that we cannot improve upon, which is our Sabbath school. And the Christian Stead Church developed that in such a way, or used it in such a way, that Sabbath school teachers were empowered with that call-in Sabbath school, and I want to celebrate them this afternoon.
Beautiful.
Because I would call in myself.
Yes.
And join in and hear the Sabbath school teachers teaching, and the class members are sharing in the Sabbath school.
Yeah.
I think that is something power to celebrate.
That's right.
Also, I just want to affirm here that Elder Horace Graham is an outstanding leader, admired by his membership, and as the pastor, I just celebrate him today again for the outstanding work that he has done. To God be the glory.
Amen. Amen. Elder Graham?
Well, let me say that you know, it's tough to hear sometimes people say things, but let me say I want to accept and acknowledge my pastor for the true man of God that he is. The Christian Stead Church is a church, as we identified, that has a significant senior population, and so these are folks who had a traditional bearing on what ministry is about. And Pastor Earl Daniel, as he spent time in the district, has really elevated that form of ministry, that visitation, that tangible, practical ministry that Pastor Matthew expressed. It's really coming to bear and coming to life in the district through the ministry of our pastor. And during this time, especially when people would feel most lonely, perhaps, and most, and sorry to overuse a term, but most vulnerable, Pastor Earl Daniel has really made a mark on what ministry should look like, and I truly appreciate him for that. Let me also say that a word of appreciation for a team of people who have rendered invaluable service to the church and to all those around. I want to highlight one group of people that remain unspoken so far, and that's the counselors that we engaged in this whole process. We have a group of individuals who are skilled counselors, and when we tossed to them the idea of being able to do ministry in this way, you know what they said? They said, but why keep it just into the church? Why not throw it out? And so they formulated a plan, called on their colleagues all across the island, and drew them together, put together a program called Help and Hope. And we have been running that for 4 weeks now, open to the community. On the 16th, we're going to spend some time on a local radio station where we'll talk again about that so that people understand how to cope in a COVID-19 environment. And we spoke about the children, we spoke about the teenagers, we spoke about parents, and then we'll be presenting a final presentation, thanks to you and the team here, on the seniors. What a powerful expression of God's grace to a community who are desperately in need, but who we found individuals who could minister to them. I want to thank the group of the COVID-19 Task Force of Christian Stead Church. We have lots of individuals involved there. I want to be careful about naming names. And so I want to just say thank you. You know who you are. You have done your man's task in really elevating this ministry, connecting with people, having the young people trained up and ready to serve, and the willingness of them to serve. I am thoroughly, thoroughly grateful for all that they have done.
Well, folk, we want to say thank you. I think it was a nice evening that we spent together. I've been receiving lots of messages affirming the ministries that you guys have been doing. I want to thank my panelists. This is only the first. of several series that we'll be airing here live every Tuesday evening at 5. We also want to take the opportunity to celebrate all our pastors around the conference. Many of them are doing some amazing things and doing great sacrifice. And as the weeks continue, we are going to be featuring some of them, because we want you to know that here in the North Caribbean Conference, we are bent on making sure that we hit where the pulse is and we deliver ministry to the people, to make sure that when this COVID-19 is over, pastors can still pull the congregations together and minister to them. Right. And those of you who are looking around the world, we want to thank you. This model developed here has had, as I indicated, international acclaim. And we want to celebrate what they are doing. And on behalf of the administration of this conference, we want to say thank you to them and to all of our pastors for what they are doing. We look forward to next week when we'll come to you with another in this series called Perspectives. We want to thank each one for being here. We trust that God will continue to bless you. And we pray that ministry will make a difference, not only today, but for eternity. God bless you, and see you next week.
Who says thanks to Pastor Filbert, an excellent communication director? I think we ought to say thanks to him
Thank you,
for
Pastor.
making this happen, and to the team that he has working with him. God bless you, Pastor.
Thank you so much. God bless you. See you next week.